So here's my next project. I'm going to turn a 2008 Surly 1x1 mountain bike into a drop bar gravel bike. In this video, I'll strip the parts off, remove the unnecessary Braze-Ons, and silver braze some new cable guides and stops. This frame has been built up a lot of different ways over the years. A single-speed mountain bike, a semi-fat bike with gears, a 700 CL rounder, and most recently a beater errand bike. My previous mountain bike frame is now built up as my new errand bike, so the Surly frame isn't being used. I'll be doing a video on the new errand bike next month. So the plan is to turn this bike into an all-road / gravel type bike. I don't really want a traditional road bike, but I do want a drop bar bike for longer rides. Something that can handle mixed terrain, but still fairly efficient on the pavement. In the past I've used my first generation Fargo as a road / gravel bike, but I have a pair of 29er rabbit hole wheels that I want to put to use, so the Fargo will be set up as a 29er flat bar ATB again. A Surly 1x1 frame might seem like a strange candidate for a gravel bike, but it's the best option I have until I can build a frame from scratch. I'm not ready for another full frame building project yet, and this will give me a point of reference for a future frame. The 2008 and 2009 1x1s had the same geometry, and according to Bike Insights, when set up with 700C by 45mm wheels, it isn't that far off from a modern gravel all-road type bike. Here it is compared to a Sklar Super something. The main differences are the stack and the bottom bracket height. I don't mind the higher bottom bracket, and the only way to fix it would be to run smaller diameter wheels, which I don't really want to do. As for the stack, I can fix that with a fork with a long steer and the right stem. And here it is compared to a Specialized Diverge. Again, the stack and bottom bracket height are the main differences. You may have noticed by now that this isn't a normal Surly 1x1 frame. A couple years after buying the frame, I had a local bike shop weld a derailleur hanger and braze a front derailleur cable stop to the frame. Then I cut off the single cable stops on the top tube and just taped all the cables to the frame. After I got my first oxyacetylene set up, I added rear rack mounts to the frame and built a custom rack. This was my very first bike-related brazing project. And that's one of the nice things about having an oxyacetylene setup in steel bikes. I can make little tweaks to the frames. So the main metalworking to do here is to remove the front derailleur cable stop, the rear brake cable bridge, and the candy studs. Back when I bought the frame, I cut the studs off so I could fit a fatter rear wheel, but at the time, I didn't have the guts to cut them all the way down. Then I'll silver braze 2 double cable stops under the top tube, and 2 cable guides on the drive side seat stay. The first step is to take all the parts off. Some of these parts will be going back on this frame, some will go into the parts bin, but these bars are going on the Fargo. They're the Ritchie Coyote bars, one of my favorite handlebars. I really like the width, rise, sweep, and overall shape of them. I'm sure I'll be tempted to put a basket back on this bike, but I'm going to try and keep this build a little lighter by sticking to only frame and seat bags. I liked this double stem setup for the errand bike. It kept the basket brackets off the main handlebar and put the basket nice and low to the front wheel. This isn't the stock 1x1 fork, but if I remember right, it's a dimension fork. Roughly the same offset and axle crown length, but with a longer steer. And I just realized as I'm editing this video, the fork doesn't have a cable guide. So I'll be adding that to my to-do list for part 3 of the series. The old Cane Creek S2 headset is still in pretty good shape, but I bought a new headset, so this one will go in the parts bin. The BB7 brakes are in pretty rough condition from several winters of riding, but I'm hoping I can clean them up enough to use for this new build. I'm planning to put some Shimano XT clipless pedals on this bike, so these flats will also go in the parts bin. These older 180mm stylo cranks will work well for this project, but I did end up getting a new GXP bottom bracket for this build. I wasn't sure what to expect when I removed the bottom bracket. There was a fair amount of rust, but it cleaned up alright. These are some nylon M5 bolts I bought online for unused bosses. Then there's the monkey nuts. These were made by Surly for the original Karate Monkey, so that the rear axle would be in the ideal spot when running a geared drivetrain. Lastly, a couple old stickers to remove. An Angry Catfish sticker from the head tube, and a Bunyan Velo from the chainstay. If you've never heard of Bunyan Velo, it was a predecessor to the bikepacking journal put out by bikepacking.com. Now it's time to start removing the extra Braze-Ons I don't need. I cut them off with a Dremel and then smooth everything out with a handheld belt sander. Then I removed the paint so I could silver braze the new cable stops and guides. After marking the location of the top tube cable stops with a punch, I cleaned the area with isopropyl and fluxed everything up. I mentioned it during my previous frame project, but I'll say it again. These Cobra Braze-On clamps are super handy and work great. I might need to do something about those rack mounts because of the rear derailleur cable. Either replace them with smaller bosses or remove them altogether. I'm going to build the bike up and see how it looks. Luckily, I had a relatively warm day to work in the garage. With just over 50 psi in the acetylene tank, this will be the last brazing I do until I exchange the tank in the spring. Next, I washed all the flux off with steaming hot water, and there it is. All the frame mods are done, at least for now. In the next video, I'll build it up and, weather permitting, take it for a test ride. In the spring, I'll strip it all down again, add cable guides to the fork, maybe some fender mounts, and possibly a custom rear rack. Then I'll clean up the frame and paint it. If you want to see how the rest of the build goes, be sure and hit the like and subscribe buttons so you'll see the next video when it's published. If you're enjoying this video, consider a super thanks. And if you haven't watched my other videos, go check them out. Thanks for watching, take care, see you next time.